Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Rachel Sheldon.
And I'm Larry Rhodes, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs. Today is December 3rd, 2013. This is a call-in show. We invite your calls to the number listed below.
And the Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun meetup, often at a bar or restaurant. Tonight's meetup at Barley's. It is at Barley's for happy hour tonight after the show for food, drink, and conversation. To find us, just look for the silver jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table.
Our other sponsor is the Rationalists of East Tennessee. They have monthly activities on the first and third Sunday mornings of every month, which are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. The second Sunday is a book club, and the fourth Sunday is a reflections gathering, which is a potluck afternoon gathering at a member's home.
Today we'll be talking about Douglas Adams' Atheism and the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
But first we have some in the news items.
And coming straight from the Vatican, Pope Francis was once a bouncer at a nightclub in Buenos Aires. And apparently...
One man with experience.
Picking and choosing, no, you can come in, no, you can't. So it seems like a pretty logical job leap.
Yeah, next step, pearly gates, right?
Exactly, and it's taking Twitter by storm. And John Favreau, a football player, I believe, suggested making a dramedy about the Pope's life, calling it "Heaven Can Wait and So Can You." And in roughly the same time, he's also suggested, I believe, over Twitter for priests not to be such sourpusses, which I don't know, it does sound like pretty good advice.
Yeah, I'd rather them be sourpusses, but then give up child rape. That would work for me.
Oh yeah, and also he suggested more interesting homilies to keep parishioners from falling asleep. Anything to make a little less, boredom in life. And so, as interesting and as close to the people as he is, still have to remember he still hates same-sex marriage and gay people. Mm-hmm. And actually...
He's talking a liberal talk, but he's not walking the liberal walk. Or progressive walk, if you want to put it that way.
Well, and a quote from his paper he recently put out about gay marriage regarding the state of gay marriage in France. As the French bishops have taught, marriage is not born of loving sentiment, ephemeral by definition, but from the depth of obligation assumed by the spouses who accept to enter a total communion of life. Thus, pretty much saying, marriage isn't about love, it is a legal contract. And so love has nothing to do with it, and it should only be between a man and a woman.
This is a classic case of an unmarried marriage counselor.
Definitely. Yeah, can you imagine? I mean, how are you supposed to spend 50 years with someone that you can't really get along with?
Well, I'm sure people do, but at least you should start off with love, and hopefully it will grow.
So it's like, that's annoying. I still think, he's better, but, better doesn't always mean good. Rush Limbaugh and Fox News have been caught calling him a Marxist because of his criticism of capitalism leaving the poor people poor and not feeding the hungry and helping people.
You mean doing what Jesus says to do.
Exactly. So I think he is a little closer, and he's definitely walking the walk. And actually, there have been rumors he's been dressing up as a regular priest to go give alms to poor people and the homeless.
He's showing more humility, that's for sure.
And driving a used car. I'm pretty happy he's actually sold the Pope Mobile.
That's good. Now, if we just sell some more stuff and turn over the money to the people who need it, the needy, the hungry, the destitute, poor.
And in a nicer story, I think Tips for Jesus, which is a handle you can find on Twitter, has been caught leaving thousands of dollars for servers on tips. So it would be something like a $100 bill and then adding $5,000 to it. And actually got caught leaving $10,000 on one tip during a bar or an eatery that was airing the Notre Dame and South Carolina football game, because apparently Tips for Jesus is a really big football fan, which makes sense.
So he's just practicing philanthropy under the name of Jesus, is that right?
And it's also been done in several other parts of the country. There have been several in Ann Arbor, Michigan, several in Chicago, and several in Los Angeles.
That's
and
cool.
they,
The Pope could learn from that.
Oh, definitely.
He's got the wherewithal to do it.
And one website estimates that about $54,000 has been shelled out so far.
Wow.
And a few of them with the University of South Carolina's slogan, "Fight On." And also, after it was reported, two $5,000 tips didn't clear, and when there was some fuss and fight and anger about that, the person who did it, Tips for Jesus, did show the credit card statement where they had actually cleared. So I kind of hope, whoever the servers were for that actually got the tip.
That would be nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
What's funny is that the ultra-conservatives, there's a joke going around the internet. It says the ultra-conservatives and right-wings complain about liberals all week long, and then on Sunday they go worship one.
I think it's really nice. I mean, that people are giving it, giving thousands of dollars to servers, but it still doesn't really fix the problem that people in the service industry in general are underpaid.
Mm-hmm.
And
they only make $2 or $3 an hour, and the rest they have to make up in tips, and all of it's of course taxed.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, it does help a few people, but it still doesn't remedy the situation.
No. I don't know how much this counts as, quote, news, but I did find this article on the Independent Record from yesterday. Charlie P. Hull Jr. writes, and I'll answer this article after I read it. Not long ago, I stopped a car one night and looked around at the lights of Helena Valley, and there were sure a lot of them, more than I realized. More being added all the time. Years ago, when I was a young fellow, the radio said more lights were being added to security at night, or for security at night. What they were saying is that under the cover of darkness, more crimes take place. Not long ago, an editorial was run saying that atheists can be good, moral people. And I reckon this can be so, but thinking on it, just where did the atheist get his morality from? What examples does he use? In living in America, does he not benefit from our forefathers who came here and set up standards by using the Bible as their guide? This is not to say that all who came here were Christians, yet most had a knowledge of God and His standards. Today in America, we continue to push God out and His standards. The morality of the country goes down, murder, rape, calling evil good and good evil. If we desire to see what America would look like without God, turn your focus upon the countries of Africa, South America, and Asia. Yes, atheists can be moral, but without God, will they? Now, I'd like to first speak about the Founding Fathers. The Founding Fathers were mainly deists. If they believed in God, they didn't necessarily believe that the God was the Christian God of the Bible.
One thing I think is pretty odd about that is South America is profoundly religious, and I wonder if maybe
98% Catholic.
And so I wonder if maybe the writer of the article doesn't consider Catholic Christian,
Yeah.
or just not the correct Christian.
Right. But even if you'll notice that among all the constitutions that are written in the world, that ours is profoundly secular. Not a mention of God or Jesus or Christianity or any of that in there. Now, he says, where do we get our morals? Well, we get our morals from our contract with society. Basically, we do good to be able to be citizens in a society that will be a good society. What I would like to ask this particular guy is you may have noticed that you don't open the paper every day to see headlines that say, atheists still murdering their neighbors, millions dead, atheists continue raping women across the country, or atheist corporations are cheating millions of customers. Did you ever wonder why not? I mean, aren't you taught by your religious leaders that you can't lead moral lives if you don't believe in God? How do you explain this? And that's a question for our audience. Those who have phones and handy and would like to call in, the number's at the bottom of the screen. Also, being a good believer yourself and accepting the Bible as the true word of a timeless God, why don't you believe in killing homosexuals, or trying to enslave your neighbor, or stoning your wife if she's not a virgin on her wedding night? Why is it that when Christian missionaries go to Africa, all of a sudden children are turning out to be witches and beaten and banned from their villages? And they base that, by the way, on the teaching in the Bible that says, don't suffer a witch to live. How do you determine what is valuable and what is right in the Bible? Some things that you ignore and that are abhorrent to you and you don't follow them. Can it be that you use a separate morality from the one that you get in the Bible? If not, everything in the Bible would be good and you would condone all of it.
Yeah, and I think, and there have been so many cases of where popular evangelists from the United States, they go and visit places where they put up death penalty laws for even being rumored to be gay.
I think it was Ghana that they've actually got death penalty laws enacted since they've been there, and the missionaries have converted most of the population to Christianity. Now they're passing laws to kill homosexuals, like it says in the Bible, and running children out of villages because they're saying that they're witches.
And I guess, or to sort of bring it in, or like a lot of parts of the Bible, to quote Douglas Adams, it's all, or as he said about his memoir, it's all absolutely devastatingly true, except for the bits that are lies.
Mark Twain said that there were upwards of 1,000 lies in the Bible.
And anyway, if we'd like to go on to our main topic for the show, or The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. One of the bigger, yeah, exactly. It's one of the more popular phenomenons that's really changed, entertainment as a rule. It's been a radio show, it's been a TV show, it's been a movie, there's books. And, so many people love it, and then but I wonder, even though Douglas Adams was a pretty vocal atheist, I just sort of wonder how many people did it. He did before he died, interviews with, atheist magazines. He was friends with Richard Dawkins, and actually he, at his 40th birthday party, introduced Richard Dawkins to his future wife.
Oh, did he?
Yeah.
That's cool.
And but there's a lot of cute quotes that, really poke fun at religion. And I think, and there's some real serious stuff, like the idea that, there's so many people that are unhappy. And then when, and they seem to, think that all these little pieces of paper are going to make them happy. And then when they find somebody, and then on Earth, when they find somebody who suggested that, you can be happy without all the money, that, they stuck him on a cross and killed him.
Well, yeah. Well, he does preach socialist ideas, which is surprising to those who read them today.
Hey,
yes, you're on the air. Have a name or a nickname?
This is Harrison.
Harrison?
Yeah.
Okay, nice to meet you. Do you have a comment or question for us?
Yeah, I wanted to make a question like, so you know how, can you kind of explain just briefly the theory of evolution for me? Because I don't see how you guys think that a guy can go from like a monkey kind of ish into a human.
Okay.
Well, the thing is it's a very, very, very slow process. I think the easiest thing.
It didn't start with monkeys either. It started with the simplest organisms. We didn't start with monkeys. We came through the apes, but we also came through the earliest mammals. We came through plants, the earliest plants, and humans still share some DNA. We're all related. All life on Earth is related.
I think one easy way to put it is, okay, you say you take some dogs, you put some of them, in a desert, with different food and resources. You put some of them in Siberia. Over time, the ones that are in Siberia, if they have short coats, they aren't going to have puppies that grow up and are able to survive in the environment. The ones that do, are the ones that are furrier. And so over time, since the furry ones survive.
Knew that was coming. Well, he started off with a good question. We were able to have a good kind of conversation until he went off the deep end. But the thing about it is, Rachel was talking about speciation. If you separate a species, like one set of dogs, let's say, put one in the Sahara and one at the North Pole, the ones who have short hair will not tend to live and reproduce. The ones that have longer hair, will have a slight advantage over those.
Yeah, and that's in Siberia. Whereas if you have if you have a short-haired dog and a long-haired dog in the desert, the one with the short hair is probably going to be more likely to survive in a hot environment, and
Right.
and
It'll
so
pass on those traits.
and so over time you're going to end up with dogs that like it has happened, where you have you have your huskies, you have your malamutes and stuff in one area. And if you look in Central and South America, if you look at dogs, you have Chihuahuas. You actually have hairless dogs that are indigenous to the area.
And even before the theory of evolution was proposed, people were doing animal husbandry and breeding special types of dogs for hundreds of years. Before it was critically understood that natural selection, and in this case, artificial selection, which is human husbandry, doing it. Now, the thing about it is, if you keep those species of animals separated for thousands of years, the random mutation that happens to them through cosmic rays and defects in genetic reproduction, they will change so much over thousands of years that they will no longer...
Millions, actually. It takes longer, usually.
That they will no longer be able to reproduce, or they won't be able to mate and reproduce viable offspring. At that point, you have new species, separate species. Okay, well, I hope that answers your question.
But I mean, I think it's good. I think a lot of people don't really understand. People understand the concept of survival of the fittest. But then, sometimes it takes a bit to really connect. That's basically what it is. If you're good at surviving, you're going to survive, and your offspring that are good at surviving are going to survive too, and eventually you're going to have something, like those fennec foxes in the desert. They have these huge ears to, stay cool, stuff like that. Whereas if you're in, camels, and they're able to store water, stuff like that, it's basically, just like the dog thing, except much more extreme.
Right.
And, and another funny thing about Douglas Adams, if you said you've read the book, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, the concept of the babblefish, which was a really cute bit where, it basically, this philosopher, sat down and said, okay, here's this creature. What the babblefish is in the book is translating fish. If you stick it in your ear, you're able to translate any language. This philosopher said.
Small fish here.
Yeah, very small. And philosopher had the idea, look, something like this could never have popped up out of natural selection. Therefore, there must be a God.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow,
this is fiction.
But the thing was, it was really funny through all these funny leaps of logic that are supposed to be so logical, and then all of a sudden God says, "Oh, you're right, I don't exist," and poof.
He disappears.
Poof of logic. Yeah. And one thing I thought was really amusing was the interconnectedness, where, obviously because, the Hitchhiker's Guide, is so popular, it's a pretty popular meme. Mm-hmm. Or just the idea of, a towel can get you through the universe everywhere.
Yeah, make sure you don't leave your towel at home.
And then, Richard Dawkins wrote about memes. Richard Dawkins was so fascinated by, was such a big fan of Adams that he wrote his first and only fan letter to him, thereby helping spread the meme. And so thought that was a pretty funny thing.
For those who are not familiar with the word meme, meme's basically an idea. And Richard Dawkins coined the term in his book, Selfish Gene.
Yeah.
And he compared memes or ideas concepts, if you will, to genes, and the fact that they have to compete for a place in the marketplace of other ideas, like genes have to compete in the marketplace for other genes to be able to be replicated and carried on. And like even just the idea of turning your hat backwards and your ball cap backwards and wearing it that way, that's an idea or a concept, and it had to compete in this world of ideas to have a place that replicate and carry on between people. So it's just a word that you're going to be hearing a lot more in the future. There's a thing on the internet now where memes are generally thought of as pictures with some words on it, jokes, whatever.
With a lot of cats.
Yeah. And those are passed around because they constitute an idea. But a meme actually can mean a lot more than that.
Definitely. And also, I think there's from Douglas Adams's life, I mean, just because you're an atheist doesn't mean that, you have, life is worthless or anything. He was incredibly fascinated with nature and became a very outspoken and popular environmentalist, and did a lot to actually save nature because he loved the planet and was trying to do his bit to save it. And he actually traveled around the world to film nature documentaries and to introduce the watchers of the BBC and then later people in America on PBS, I believe, to introduce them to, okay, here's this animal that needs our help. It's going extinct. We have to be the ones to save it. And it was actually pretty successful. And he also had a great love of technology, which I think is pretty funny because the Hitchhiker's Guide, of what from the book, the actual guide itself, it pretty much it's a tablet or a sort of older version of cell phone now. It's a smooth black device about the size of a book, with all these buttons to press on it.
No, I always thought that the opening of the series was a lot of fun, where these aliens came through with a construction crew saying that the Earth was in the right of way and they were going to have to get rid of it for an intergalactic highway.
Yeah, I think it sort of shows, and it also sort of a metaphor of how a lot of people are now. Oh, who cares about this sentimentalism or anything, or who cares about the happiness of one person when so many other people can maybe have save a few seconds off their, commute or something like that. And then, okay, well, what's going to, and then showing it on a larger scale of just how devastating it can be.
You've got another book there, the Salmon and Doc.
Yeah.
Is that a continuation of the...
part of it.
It
it has writings that actually has Douglas Adams's interview with the American Atheists. And it actually has a few pieces from Dawkins.
Works, isn't it?
It has a few Hitchhiker stories in it too. But it also, there is this, like I said before, Adams loved technology, computers. He always wanted to be, which was sort of fitting for a sci-fi author, or being to be obsessed with computers. But he, came up with this parable, which I think does a good job in explaining, a lot of the frustration that atheists can have with religion or dogma or superstition.
Okay.
Or actually, it's in here.
Okay.
Sorry, I actually had everything all planned out. And then my rabbit ate through my computer cable. So, a man didn't understand how televisions work and was convinced that there must be lots of little men inside the box manipulating images at high speed. An engineer explained about high-frequency modulations of the electromagnetic spectrum, transmitters and receivers, amplifiers and cathode ray tubes, scan lines moving up and down a phosphorescent screen. The man listened to the engineer with careful attention, nodding his head at every step of the argument. At the end he pronounced himself satisfied. He really did now understand how televisions work, but I expect there are just a few little men in there, aren't there? And I think, that's a frustration that, I think a lot of us feel
As a computer
Yeah.
consultant for 17 years, it's a frustration that I felt. A lot of people don't understand how the computers worked, especially back in the days when I was first doing it. And they give me all kinds of, my cup holder broke. They'd say when their CD tray is broken off, that type of thing. So,
Yeah, and most people, would roll their eyes and think, oh, that's silly. I mean, it's a TV or it's a computer. Surely there isn't anything like that. But when you try to explain to them about nature and evolution and everything, suddenly everything hangs up. And while they'll accept every, part of, or they'll accept, the medicine that they get from their doctor, that it's possible, or it's possible the doctor learned it from evolutionary biology, and that, that's actually helping them get better. They're fine with that, but it all of a sudden get hung up with the idea that that may be all there is.
That's funny about people who don't accept evolution because they don't have enough evidence. They demand perfect evidence for that, but they don't demand any evidence for the beliefs that they have from the Bible or from their
Well,
religion.
it's like what George Carlin said about, most people will accept that the fact that there is a God without any evidence, but if they see a sign that says wet paint don't touch, they have to touch it to make sure.
Yeah.
And so, and let's see here. And Adams also did, a lot of people didn't know, work on Doctor Who, which is, a pretty thought-provoking and popular TV show that dealt with, a lot of subjects like that. And also in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, I think there's actually a really good example of, what if the higher power isn't what you actually wanted it to be?
Right.
Where it turns out that that mice ruled the planet and did everything and manipulated people, and and how the idea that maybe that's what how a real God would act, controlling us, manipulating us without knowing it, and then when we find out that it's not such a benevolent or or it doesn't always have our best interest, yeah. In the aliens in the book, they're the mice, they're trans-dimensional beings, and they're really petty and angry, and they were controlling us. And then the character of Arthur Dent, he's just incredibly outraged that so you're the all-powerful beings of the universe, and you're like this.
Yeah. How can we expect to be any better than that?
And, and what it would feel like to actually get that, get the idea of what the all-powerful being is wrong.
I've always thought that the God as portrayed in the Bible was always acted like he was a spoiled 8-year-old. If he didn't get his way, he would start killing people. Just give them plagues, even his own people.
And so I do think it was a good allegory for, what might actually happen if people actually met, an all-powerful being like that.
Well, that's one of the arguments against the Pascal's wager. People say, you can either believe in God and go to heaven, or don't believe in God and go to hell. But if I don't believe and you're right, nothing happens to me. It's a false dichotomy. You're saying there is only one God to consider, and it's my God. But when there are actually 10,000 gods that people worship all over the world, people, past and present, there have been another 10,000 historical gods. The thing about it is, if there is a God, it might not be any of those. And the God that really does exist, if there is one, might not even have a hell. And he may not even care if we worship him or believe in him or not, or it. So, I mean, that right there throws Pascal's wager right out the window, and there's other reasons as well.
Yeah, and then there's things like in the book where God's final message is finally revealed, and it ends up being we're sorry for the technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Okay, and I believe it's time for the
mid-program break.
Yep. In case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions.
Shows are live every Tuesday from 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on this community access television, and also streaming online outside the Knoxville area. You can view it by going to ctvknox.org. This is a call-in show. We're live today, December 3rd, 2013. And viewers are asked to call in at any time. The number is at the bottom of the screen.
And the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets every Tuesday. We have evening meetups at Barley's, taproom and pizzeria for fun, food, drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, free thinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
It's starting right now, and will probably go till 7 or 8 o'clock tonight. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions of subjects topical and timeless. Once a month, we get together for a book club, but you need not have read the book to attend, but of course it helps.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet. Well, you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
Sam, would you mind running the informational video?
Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org. If you live in or around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else, well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Taproom and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you...
And we're back. And if we don't get any callers, I may threaten to read some Vogon poetry.
No, feel free to call in. The number's at the bottom of the screen. We've mentioned quite a few things today you might want to talk about. This is your show as well as ours, and anytime.
And, and just, an idea to sort of put us in our place, orbiting at far out in the uncharted backwaters of the unfashionable end of the western spiral arm of the galaxy lies a small unregarded yellow sun. This is the introduction to the Hitchhiker's Guide. And orbiting this at a distance of roughly 98 million miles is an utterly insignificant little blue-green planet whose ape-descended life forms are so amazingly primitive that they still think digital watches are a pretty neat idea. This planet has, or rather had, a problem, which was this. Most of the people living on it were unhappy for pretty much of the time, and many solutions were suggested for this problem. But most of these were largely concerned with the movements of small green pieces of paper, which is odd because on the whole it wasn't the small green pieces of paper that were unhappy. So the problem remained. Lots of the people were mean and most of them were miserable, even the ones with digital watches. Many were increasingly of the opinion that they'd all made a big mistake in coming down from the trees in the first place, and some even said that even the trees had been a bad move and no one should have ever left the oceans. Yeah. And then one Thursday, nearly 2,000 years after one man had been nailed to a tree for saying how great it would be to be nice to people for a change, a girl sitting on her own in a small cafe in Rickmansworth suddenly realized what it was that had been going wrong this whole time. And she finally knew how the world could be made a good and happy place. This time it was right and would work, and no one would have to get nailed to anything. Sadly, before she could get to a phone to tell anyone about it, a terrible, stupid catastrophe happened and the idea was lost forever. And so, it's one of those things that to put
Douglas Adams on the map. Literally.
Yeah, definitely.
In literature.
And sort of, or put the idea of, where we are and everything. And, and there's a pretty good quote about how, how skewed our position on life is. And I can't remember precisely how it goes, but it was something along the lines of to, sort of put how, odd our point of view is. remember that we're living in a deep gravity well on this small rock with, a little bit of water and a little bit of gas on it, hurtling through 98 million miles away from a nuclear reactor spewing, radiation at us.
That's millions of times our size.
And that's even spinning around, this huge galaxy going around a supermassive black hole.
And it's only one of hundreds of billions of other galaxies as well.
And so it's a good idea to think about, it's so, and people think that their point of view is the only way to do things when, but, when it's even, just a good thing just to, and can even be hard just to even think about things from another person's point of view.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've read it, but I've seen the movie. The movies are out there. If you would like to find out more about his work and don't really want to get into a book this big, although
that is actually 5 books though in one.
Together.
So,
but it makes up the complete Hitchhiker's Guide. There are movies out there, and you can see those in a few hours.
Yeah, and of course the radio shows, I believe, are still available somewhere.
There'll be podcasts now.
Yeah, and a good prayer about. I'm sorry, I can't remember anything I was going to say, but trying to think of. I also like the idea in the book of the Earth being a computer to solve the problem, and the problem being the meaning of life.
Yeah, 42.
Yep.
There was a joke, basically one of those things he wrote about that this civilization had set the supercomputer the question of what is the meaning of life and life, love, and everything. Or I think that's what it was. And then, hundreds of years went by, and it finally spit out 42.
He was part of about where he was atheist, slightly less orthodoxly for an enthusiastic, almost evangelical atheist. He would also host carol services every Christmas. As a child, I was an active Christian. I used to love the school choir and remember the carol service as always such an emotional thing. He adds Bach to the Beatles and the Pythons in his pantheon of influences, but how does this square with his passionate atheism? Life is full of things that move or affect you in one way or another. He explains the fact that I think Bach was mistaken doesn't alter the fact that I think that the B minor Mass is one of the most great pinnacles of human achievement. It still absolutely moves me to tears to hear it. I find the whole business of religion profoundly interesting, but it does mystify me that otherwise intelligent people take it seriously.
Many people ask me, I have a blog now, digitalfreethought.com, and get questions on it, like, why don't you believe in God? Well, the answer is, it's basically the same reason that you don't believe in Zeus or Thor or green people on Venus. There's no evidence. And of course, you're going to say, what do you mean? Your evidence of God. He made you. I have to point out that you're using a logical fallacy that could be, are you using a logical fallacy called presupposition? You presuppose the existence of a God, mentally assign him the power to create you. And then you say, how can you say there's no God? You're standing right there. Then I would say, see that car there? I made that car using toothpicks. How can you doubt it? There it is. In my claim, I would have presupposed my ability to make cars out of toothpicks before I even made the argument. And the thing about it is, you would say that I would presuppose the non-existence of God. But that's true. I mean, the time to believe something is when the evidence presents itself, not believe it and then ask for evidence, or believe it and then say, prove it's not true. You would have to say, if there's natural explanation for something, why would you want to presuppose a supernatural explanation for something?
And I think it's pretty interesting now that we have, MRIs and CT scanners, you can actually find that there are certain colors or wavelengths of light in addition to sound that actually can move someone to feel like they're having a spiritual experience and, or a sense of wonder. They
actually can create what they call a God helmet. They put this on subjects, experimental subjects. They put them on, blindfold them, leave them in a darkened room with this helmet on, and then they'll give it some electricity, with activate some magnets, on a certain location on your brain, and the person will get a sensation that he's got other people in the room with him. He's basically they're forcing a type of epilepsy on this person, and of course epilepsy is naturally occurring. So we have people in history who have had naturally occurring epilepsy that have heard voices, thought they were listening to God, thought they were following people that weren't there. It's all explainable through natural occurrences. There's no real reason now to think that there are supernatural ones, especially when no supernatural evidence has ever been submitted for that purpose.
Yeah, if you've read one thing I'd recommend reading about the seizures is Oliver Sacks's book, Hallucinations. He actually talks about it. People that are prone to a certain kind of seizure, he'd met patients that had undergone 5 or 10 different religious changes, and they all coincided with seizures, and a lot of them actually stopped after, even if when they knew what was going on, they still had this feeling, and so they, and it was thought pretty funny that, they go from, Buddhism to Judaism to whatever, and there was one, though, actually, it was a bus driver. I thought it was pretty funny. He went through a couple, but then at the last one, he had the profound experience that there was no God, which I thought was funny. So it sort of runs the gamut.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. We have a caller now. We're going to ask for the name or a nickname. You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hello, caller. Are you there?
Hello, can you hear us now?
Hey.
We're not hearing you. Can you give us your name again, please?
Man, I think y'all messed up, dude. Y'all messed up people.
We're messed up people. Is there anything you might have to say that is constructive or in a query? I guess not. Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting to read about the different religious experiences, and actually but there have also been really interesting cases where they'd actually study the neurology and what was going on in people that were praying and meditating, and it actually does change the way the brain functions during states like that. And so, where, different parts of the brain start communicating with each other, actually.
Right.
When they start feeling at one with other things, they're actually becoming sort of more in tune with their own mind and body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but talking about putting on the helmet, or once they know this is happening, they're still affected by it?
Well, in the case with
process,
a
chemical or electrical process. Go ahead and hit that, and we'll give you a second. Chemical electrical processes affect the mind and body just like alcohol would. You may know what's going on, but it still affects you.
Hey, caller. Thanks for being on air. And can we have a name or nickname?
Hey, well, this is Faithless Forrest. I'm at home today with a little sore stomach, but I'm watching.
Sorry to hear that.
Well, and I love the program's subject, but and since you haven't mentioned it, I thought it was time for me to drag Marvin in, Marvin the Paranoid Android. I think he's one of the most wonderful characters, and I don't think you've mentioned him.
Yeah, the one with the, unfortunately, if you got my email, or like I said, I had a ton of notes. They're stuck on my computer. But yes, he's an interesting character with the brain the size of a planet, but, because he knows so much, he's constantly depressed. And is there anything you'd like to say about Marvin in particular?
Well, I guess I thought it was terribly ironic that the setup at the end of the Hitchhiker's Guide and the beginning of the Restaurant at the End of the Universe involved poor Marvin having to wait for them to arrive at the restaurant at the end of the universe.
For millions of years.
Perhaps you could explain that.
Okay, he knew what was going to happen. It was just a matter of waiting millions and millions of years and losing body parts, all except, of course, for the anodes on his left side that always gave him trouble, apparently.
That would be enough to depress anybody, I would think.
And, and then the part where, he finally sees, he lives just long enough to see God's final message, that, of course, being sorry for the technical difficulties.
All right. Well, I think there's some other marvelous characters there. The guy who made the fjords in Norway, he has a marvelous name. Can you remember that name?
You had to ask.
The guy with 2 heads?
No, that was Zaphod.
Oh.
Zaphod is
yeah.
the president of the universe, or the galaxy. But Slarty Bartfarce, which is just a fabulous name to say.
Yeah, definitely. And then... also, I really like that guy that lived all alone in the planet with a shack, with his dog, I believe, and how and he was the person who pretty much ran the universe because of course he was the best person to actually run the universe because he didn't want to run the universe.
He didn't want the job. Yes. You don't want a megalomania with that much power.
But of course, the people that are always drawn to such positions are the ones you really don't want them to be. Just sort of like the worst actors tend to be actors.
Alrighty. Well, there are some other fun characters that he invented, and you mentioned the 2-headed man.
Yeah, Zaphod. Sort of a 2-headed psychopath or sociopath.
But he had the important part in that it was his mission, or he had a secret mission unknown to himself. And of course, maybe we're going to give away plot points here, but in the course of the books, he's kind of a central character, and he's at times loathsome, but then there are times when he's charming's not exactly the right word, but you're rooting for him.
Sort of an anti-hero then?
All righty. Well, I'm not sure if you actually mentioned the title of Douglas Adams' book where he was talking about endangered species.
Yes, you're correct. I believe the program's called Last Chance to See. Yeah, there is a book that's what it's called. It was co-written with Mark Carwardine. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Last Chance to See. Where it covered stuff like actually a rare or endangered species of parrot that lived in Australia, that lives in Australasia, I believe in New Zealand, that because of evolution lost its ability to fly. But it doesn't really know that yet.
Well, some domesticated animals like chickens and stuff, they don't fly so well either, but
well, these would actually, they'd actually get in the tree and like, okay, I'm going to try, and then just sort of hit the ground.
Oh, my goodness. It sounds like a Douglas Adams joke.
Yeah, it really does.
What strikes me as strange or funny is that there's more humor in like one page of this book than like in the entire Bible. And in no instance that I'm aware of is there any place where God himself exhibits the slightest sign of humor.
Or in just points of their just being baffled, or just simply being baffled before going into non-existence. And also, and I think I find in a lot of writings about nature, there is that sense of wonder and awe that you would, that you expect. And so it shows that, he was able to get that and actually live a meaningful life without religion, like where there was one where he actually went, he writes about the miracle, or just how amazing it is to be swimming with manta rays. And then he actually volunteered with a few friends to trek through to raise money, to trek through part of Africa to go to Mount Kilimanjaro. And they actually alternated wearing a rhino suit. The thing being, it was for a man who was about 5'10", and Douglas Adams was about 6.5 feet tall. And
so he was a little tight in the rhino suit.
Or there were just big gaps between the top and the bottom. And it was nice, though. I mean, in addition to the environmental, doing the environmental work. When he was with the Save the Rhinos and fundraising and doing that, a lot of the money actually went to the villages, so that the people in the villages wouldn't have to be forced to poach in order to survive.
Yeah, well, it's a loss. He went too early. I believe he died of a heart attack kind of young. And
in the ultimate irony, at the gym.
oh dear. Okay. Well, I hope you get a few more callers who are on topic. Perhaps people can comment on their favorite characters from the movies or the books, and I'll free up the line. Bye then.
Okay,
See ya.
thanks, Forrest. That's why I never go to the gym.
But yeah, and he did die quite young, and of course it made the news at the time, when it did happen.
Reminds me of that mega runner, what was his name, Jim Fix, that was doing everything for his heart and then died of a heart attack. But I'm sure there are extenuating circumstances even for that.
But I think another good thing about his life, it also showed, you don't have to, be successful incredibly early in your life, or, have everything planned out in your teens, which does get forced through people's throats a lot. And he was, when he was 24, he thought he was, he had a 24-year-old life crisis because he didn't know what he was going to do or anything. And of course, just a couple of years after that, became very, very successful. And, one of those...
Good news for a lot of people nowadays. They're getting right out of college and don't really know which way to go. It's encouraging.
Or, and even, when you're in high school and getting ready to go to college, what's your major going to be? What's your major going to be? When in reality, people, change careers, often several times in their lives. And so I think, it's good to, sort of take inspiration and like, okay, well, I don't have to have my life ruined. It's not over yet. Welcome to Freethought Forum. May we have a name or nickname?
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay,
we can't really hear you either.
We have to give them just a second for the sound to come up on the phone.
My name is Kenneth.
Okay, very good, Kenneth. Nice to have you call in.
My name is Kenneth.
Do you have a comment or a question, Kenneth?
And I want to...
Yes, you're on.
I have a comment.
Okay.
Listen just to the phone.
I want to thank you for being on the air. I think it is time that we've had a program like this.
Okay, is this your first time watching?
And I hope you continue, and I'll watch you every week. I just discovered you, and I think you're wonderful, and I will watch you every week.
Thank you, and if you want, actually, actually a mysterious person also puts the show on YouTube, so if you type in Freethought Forum Knoxville, you should be...
one of our fans. We don't really have anything to do with that.
I'll do that.
But you're welcome to come down and visit us. We have meetups every week. The Atheist Society of Knoxville meet at the Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. It's going on right now, and it'll go on every Tuesday until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night.
And they have quite a lot of, they have a decent selection of food. I'm not a drinker, so I mean, it's a pretty open environment. If even if you're, not really into that.
Yeah. Just when you do come down, look for the largest table there with the most people. On Tuesday night, we'll be there.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thanks for calling.
And the YouTube channel is Finitist, Finitist. Yep. And and you can look at all of the shows that we've done in how many years has it been? 3?
3 years.
And so. And trying to remember what we talked about. Actually, with this show, I was thinking of, of course, when I was trying to get everything ready, the quote popped into my head. I love deadlines. I love the whooshing sound as they whiz by.
That's funny. But we have about 5 minutes left in the show. We could take one more quick question or call or comment. The numbers at the bottom of the screen, lines are open.
Mm-hmm. And another thing did you know he actually worked on video games?
No, I didn't.
Yes, and one idea of his that unfortunately was never completed was an idea about a game called God. And
you get to play God, is that it?
Okay. Oops, wrong book.
There's some game out there right now called The Gods, I think, where you get to be God, you get to play God in your own little world.
trying to think of where it is. But the idea was that there were going to be several gods. You have a Muslim god and a Jewish god and a Christian god, and everything's sort of going at it. It was a pretty odd
if
idea.
You think about it, back in the days where there were many gods, polytheism, as it were, it made a lot more sense than when you whittle it down to one god and he's responsible for everything. Because there are things that you don't really want that God to be, and if he's going to be a good God, you don't want that God to be responsible for. But if you have multiple gods, you can say, well, this one's a bad God, this one's a medium God, that's a good God, and they're all warring, and it makes more sense.
Yeah, okay, here it is. After that, we were going to do a program called God and program all God's attributes into it. And you'd have all the different denominations of God in it. You know, a Methodist God, a Jewish God, and so on. I wanted to be the first person to have a computer software burned in the Bible Belt, which I felt was a rite of passage that any young medium had to go through.
Sounds right.
And of course, which was interesting to find a book which was actually about a book in the whole.
Hold up that one.
Oh yeah, Don't Panic. It's by Neil Gaiman, who is a pretty popular author. Wrote Sandman, Anansi Boys.
I've actually
so on
read
and so
Sandman
forth.
series. It's very good. And he's a good. He writes a lot of TV shows now too.
Yeah, trying to think.
Do we have another call?
Yeah.
What is that? Okay, we're going to try to take one more call. Give the phone just a second to get your volume up, and then we'll ask you for your name. Now we have your name? I think we lost
Okay,
that one.
yes, I think I heard the tone.
Yeah.
Or not.
We're having problems with the phone. Yeah, but the line is not cutting off up here.
Yeah, and actually Neil Gaiman, he wrote a pretty funny book too, if you've read it, called Good Omens. He wrote it with Terry Pratchett. It's a pretty funny way in which the apocalypse goes completely horribly wrong.
Oh no. How can it go any more wrong than the apocalypse itself?
Like a mix-up with babies where the spawn of Satan and another child were mixed up, so the spawn of Satan actually ended up in a nice home with a kind family, and so he ended up being a pretty good kid, and when these hellhounds come that are, supposed to be his beck and call, because they're supposed to change to fit him, they turn into like two little terriers.
I can see where that would go wrong.
And,
But it's fiction, folks, remember, fiction.
And just funny bits about witch hunters and a witch who saw how the apocalypse was going to happen and how she decided to get back at the people who were going to burn her. And there's also some pretty funny bits about how there have been Bible translations and copies that had misprints and such. Where the one that said, thou shalt commit adultery.
Oh, no.
Yeah, but there's just little bits where one where there's a couple verses added to Genesis at the end of it, where the angel that with the burning sword that's supposed to guard Eden felt really bad for Adam and his wife because she was already pregnant, so he pretended to misplace his sword so they could have fire so they could survive, and then God coming in and where's your sword? Oh, I don't know, I must have laid it around somewhere. And of course it's with all these these and thines and thous.
Well, we're going to have to start wrapping things up now. It's your pen and paper. So that's funny. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee, bringing you 3 years of free thought and going strong.
Please send us feedback or leave a voicemail at 865-272-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com. You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, and 2200 Greenwich Mean Time at ctvnox.org. And we'd like to